When you're dealing with writers and talking about, career trajectory, and you're making plans and writing specs, as we all know, it's a tough old game. It's a tough old industry. It can really hammer your confidence and, your kind of yeah, your will to kind of keep going. So how do you ever talk to your clients or talk to writers about navigating the sort of the mental side of things and kind of dealing with rejection and like how to take that on board? Is that something that you always
Yeah,
keep in
it
mind?
is. It is a big part of what we do in the coaching is we are probably your harshest critic on the work, for sure.
Yeah.
But we're also your biggest cheerleader. And we're there to help you build that resilience, I guess. And one of my favorite articles on the Script Angel website. So on the website, we've got a writer's hub, which has got hundreds of articles about career advice, approaching producers, agents, and then loads of articles on craft. One of my favorite is called the Rejection Collection. And it is all about sending your work out, and the aim being to collect rejections.
Very
Uh,
nice.
because if you just reframe it like that, it just takes the pressure off that sending out doing anything other than delivering you another rejection, which is great because it's a numbers game.
Absolutely. And otherwise, because what's the opposite of that? It's you've made no connections. You haven't tried
Yeah,
and you get nothing
and no one's
from it.
seen your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's part of it, isn't it? It's understanding that it's getting yourself in a mindset of, okay, I'm going to be vulnerable a million times a year, and I need to get used to kind of putting myself self out there. So let's take a writer, for example. So say there's a writer that's out there, they've been writing lots of bits and bobs, and they feel like they've been trying and trying and trying, and they just, for whatever reason, it's just not happening. They're not, they've entered competitions, that's not working. They've tried querying agents and things, that's not working. What would you advise at that point to someone that is going, they feel like they're going around the houses? How would you look to diagnose what's going on there?
That's so interesting and tricky without reading the material
Yeah,
because
totally. Yeah. Well, that's it.
it,
Would it be, do you think it would be material?
not always, but if the scripts you're sending out are consistently not even getting through the first sift of script comps,
Yeah.
that's the most likely, is that the material is just not quite good enough. And there are other scripts out there, as we know, there are thousands. So I'm sure your guys all know that BBC Writers Room will get over 5,000 submissions most years.
Yeah, totally.
And we work with writers in the US as well, and there's 50,000 spec scripts registered every year. So it's a it's a daunting prospect, and I think but I think those kind of, if you're not quite even getting through the first round of stuff, it might be worth getting some feedback on the work, because there might be some really obvious stuff you can do to improve the material to give it a better shot.
And sometimes those things can be simple as well, can't they? It's
Yeah.
just they need to be pointed out from someone. One thing I wanted to ask you about on this subject, really, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit. I'd like to come to competitions after this, and how they kind of play into, this idea of getting yourself out there. But in terms of that feedback and getting feedback, it really seems like a mad minefield. And I have writers come to me all the time where they've had some kind of feedback from somewhere, whether it's other platforms, whether it's, consultancy firms, or whether it's a very specific, but it could even be a well-known kind of professional organization. And they've just had feedback that has sent them in a spin. And it's so hard to navigate, isn't it?
It is, and it's it's something we sometimes find ourselves sort of picking up the pieces from a little bit. It's not unusual for us to be approached by writers who have had feedback from elsewhere that has done exactly that. They've lost all their confidence, they're big notes, but they don't really know if they agree with them. They certainly are not sure how to implement them. Or they've had feedback from different places that kind of pull the project in completely opposing directions. And then you're really lost as to what to do. And so some of that is just maybe the person giving the feedback didn't quite understand your intention.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we don't do written feedback at Script Angel, and we don't do one-off notes, is exactly that, because the biggest part of our job in scripted development is to really understand your intention, because only if we understand what you're trying to do,
Yeah.
can we understand, well, that's not quite what's coming across, and maybe if we did this and this, it would be clearer to the reader.
Do you know what? That seems...
And when you're just writing written notes, you can't ask that question, right? So we only do conversations, and we do iterations over months, because how can you know?
Do you know what? I think you've completely nailed it, because I think it seems so obvious, and so obvious that you want to be judging the intention, not judging just the material at face value, because it's very easy to judge material at face value. And I think anybody that picks up a script and reads it, immediately they're gonna make a judgment. And if it's finished, if it's kind of going to be on TV or whatever, you're well within your rights to judge it as an art form, right? Because it's gone through all this. But when it's in its early stages and the writer's still figuring it out, and they're still vulnerable, and they're still kind of so impressionable, because I'm a really impressionable writer. I when I'm in my cooking phase, I'm so sensitive with my ideas. I'm even though I've created an entire platform that relies on people talking to each other and providing feedback, I'm really reluctant to do it with my own work, because these guys are way braver than I am. Just because I'm so sensitive to just even minor flickers in people and in their judgment of this material. And you've nailed it, because what I would want them to understand is my intention, so that they can help me kind of draw it out, right?
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. My job really, and all of our jobs in scripted development, if you're good, I think, is help your writer get really clear on their intention, and then I understand it too, and make sure that intention is super clear on the page. That's basically it. So which is not like,
and it's so helpful for the writer as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so helpful for the writer. It seems so simple, but it's so helpful for the writer as well, because they can, like you said, if they're one of those people that have gone out there and they've tried again and again and they're just not hitting the ground and people aren't picking it up, then maybe it is that's something it could be, right? It could be that, oh no, that their intention is in the right place, it's just not coming across properly. And so there's certain things, like maybe their protagonist isn't clear and the POV is slightly off, or kind of, they introduce too many characters and it waters down the premise, or all those sorts of things. And it can be so simple sometimes.
Yeah. So we just need to ask really good questions. And you can't do that with a one-off set of written notes, which is why we're not in that space. They can be helpful, I think, early on as a writer for kind of pointing out basics. But once you get to a certain level, I think one-off notes from somebody who doesn't know you and doesn't know the work, I don't think is particularly helpful.
And the thing is, it's reflected. I think I share that sensibility, because that's why a lot of what we do on Scribe Lounge, when it's, if we are doing writing groups and things, when it comes to the pro members, the most popular groups that people come to again and again are live conversations, even in small groups with their peers over and over again. Because like you said, writing feedback has a certain, it does serve a function sometimes if people are clear and direct. But when it comes to having a conversation, even if it's just, the best part of those groups is when the writer just explains a little bit about the idea to you first, or where it came from, or kind of where the seed, and then you might have read the whole material and gone, oh God, that's way better than what I've just read, and so let's see if we can actually line that up and pull some things out.
Absolutely.